I sat in my small apartment surrounded by towers of books that lined every wall. To me, they were not just paper and ink. They were worlds, lives, dreams captured in words. This was my sanctuary, the place where I felt most alive. But to my mother, these books were nothing more than evidence of my failure. She had said it more times than I could count, her voice sharp with disappointment. You play with books like a child while your brother builds a real life. Those words echoed in my mind every single day. What she did not know, what nobody in my family knew, was that I had a secret, and that secret was about to change everything at my brother's engagement party. Before I tell you how everything changed at my brother's engagement party, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe, because this story about family books and hidden success might just surprise you. Now let me take you back to where it all began. My family was small but complicated. After my father passed away when I was 12 years old, my mother worked as an accountant to raise me and my older brother Marcus. She poured everything into making sure we had opportunities she never had. Marcus embraced what she wanted. He became a corporate lawyer, the kind of son who made her proud at every family gathering. He wore expensive suits, drove a sleek car, and talked about cases that involved millions of dollars. I was different. While Marcus spent his childhood on soccer fields and basketball courts, I spent mine in libraries and bookstores. I fell in love with stories, with the way words could build entire universes. When it came time for college, Marcus went to law school. I chose English literature. My mother did not say much then, but I could see the disappointment settling into the lines around her mouth. After graduation, I did what I had always dreamed of doing. I became a writer. Not the kind who writes articles for magazines or content for websites. I wrote novels, historical fiction that required months of research and careful attention to detail. I created characters who lived in different centuries, who faced wars and revolutions, and love that transcended time. But I did not want fame or recognition. I wanted the work itself, the craft of building a story that mattered. So I published under a pen name. Only a few close friends knew my real identity. My books sold steadily in their niche market. They were not blockbusters, but they found their readers. People who loved history, who appreciated careful prose, who wanted stories that made them think. The income was stable. I paid my bills, saved a little, lived simply in my one-bedroom apartment. I did not need much. I had my books, my work, and my quiet life. Every Sunday my mother insisted on family dinner. It was her way of keeping us connected, of pretending we were still the tight unit we had been when my father was alive. One Sunday evening in spring, we gathered around her dining table. Marcus arrived first, wearing a charcoal suit, even though it was a casual dinner. He always dressed like he might need to meet a client at any moment. He launched into a story about a major case he had just won, something involving corporate fraud and a settlement that made headlines. My mother's face glowed with pride. She hung on every word, asking questions, praising his brilliance. Then she turned to me. "And what about you, Gabriel? Still reading those books?" Her tone carried that familiar edge, the one that said she was asking out of obligation, not genuine interest. I tried to explain my work, to tell her about the novel I was finishing, about the research trips I had taken to historical sites. But she waved her hand dismissively. "Reading will not pay bills, Gabriel." It was not the first time she had said something like that, but it stung differently that night. Marcus glanced at me with what might have been sympathy, then said, "Everyone has their path, Mom." But he did not push back, did not defend me. He just changed the subject. I sat there in silence, feeling smaller with each passing minute. I told myself she was just worried about my future, that her criticism came from love. But it was hard to believe that when her words felt like tiny cuts that never quite healed. Over the next 6 months, the comparisons became constant. Marcus bought a townhouse in an upscale neighborhood, the kind of place with a small yard and large windows that let in morning light. My mother organized a housewarming party and invited what seemed like half the city. I showed up with a bottle of wine, something I had carefully selected because I knew Marcus appreciated good wine. My mother saw the bottle and frowned. "You should save money, not spend on expensive wine." The comment was quiet, meant just for me, but it carried the weight of all her disappointments. Throughout the party, relatives and family friends asked me about my life. "How is work going? What are you doing these days?" Before I could answer, my mother would interject with her own version. "He reads books all day." The way she said it made it sound like a character flaw, like I was wasting my life on something frivolous. I tried to correct her, to explain that I was a writer, that I published books. She responded with that devastating little phrase. "Oh, so you write little stories." The dismissal in her voice was absolute. Marcus looked embarrassed but said nothing. He had always been the peacekeeper, avoiding conflict, keeping things smooth. I understood. He was in a difficult position, caught between his mother and his brother. But his silence hurt almost as much as her words. Then came the news that should have been purely happy. Marcus told us he was getting engaged. Her name was Emma, and she was 28 years old, a graphic designer who worked for a creative agency downtown. She had dark hair that fell past her shoulders, sharp, intelligent eyes, and a laugh that seemed genuine. The first time I met her was at a Sunday brunch my mother hosted. My mother was immediately taken with Emma. She talked about how perfect they were together, how excited she was to have Emma join the family. When Emma asked about me, my mother's enthusiasm dimmed. "Gabriel is my quiet one, still figuring things out." The phrase stung because it was so dismissive, so certain that I had not yet become anything worth mentioning. Emma seemed genuinely curious, though. She asked what I liked to do, what I spent my time on. When I mentioned books and writing, her face lit up with real interest. "That is fascinating. What kind of writing do you do?" Before I could answer properly, my mother cut in. "Do not get him started on books, we will be here all night." She said it like it was a joke, but the underlying message was clear. My interests were not worth anyone's time. The conversation moved on, and I felt Emma's confused glance in my direction. She could sense something was wrong, but she did not know me well enough to ask. The real breaking point came at Thanksgiving dinner 3 months before the engagement party. My mother's house was full of extended family cousins. I barely saw aunts and uncles who remembered me as the quiet kid who always had his nose in a book. Marcus stood up and officially announced his engagement to Emma. Everyone cheered and congratulated them. Glasses were raised, toasts were made. Then someone, an uncle whose name I could never remember, turned to me with a jovial smile. "And when will you settle down, Gabriel?" my mother answered before I could open my mouth. "Gabriel needs to figure out his career first. He plays with books like a child while his brother builds a real life." The words rang out across the room. Conversations stopped. People looked down at their plates or suddenly became very interested in their drinks. The silence was thick and uncomfortable. I felt heat rise to my face, felt my hands clench under the table. Emma was staring at my mother with an expression of shock. Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear. I forced a smile, tried to make light of it. "I am doing fine, Mom." But she was not done. "Fine does not pay for retirement, sweetheart." The endearment somehow made it worse, made the criticism sound almost loving when it was anything but. Marcus finally spoke up. "Mom, that is enough." His voice was firm, the lawyer voice he used when he needed to take control of a situation. But the damage was done. Everyone had heard. Everyone knew exactly what my mother thought of me. I stayed for another hour because leaving immediately would have made it worse. But as soon as I could reasonably excuse myself, I left. I drove home in silence, my mind replaying that moment over and over. The humiliation was not just about the words. It was about being diminished in front of people I had known my whole life, about having my mother publicly declare that my life had no value. The engagement party was held at an upscale venue downtown, the kind of place with floor-to-ceiling windows and ambient lighting that made everything look softer and more beautiful. I arrived alone, wearing the one good suit I owned. It was simple, dark blue, nothing flashy. Marcus and Emma greeted guests near the entrance, both of them glowing with happiness. Emma gave me a warm hug. "I am so glad you came, Gabriel." There was something in her voice, a kindness that felt genuine. My mother was already working the room, introducing Marcus and Emma to various guests, talking about the wedding plans, basking in the attention. When she got to me, her introduction was brief and loaded with subtext. "This is my younger son, Gabriel. He is still finding himself." The words hung in the air like an apology she was making on my behalf. A friend of my mother's, a woman with silver hair and too much jewelry, turned to me with polite interest. "What do you do, Gabriel?" I opened my mouth to answer, but my mother was faster. "He reads a lot. I keep telling him to get a real job." A few people laughed, that uncomfortable laugh people make when they do not know how else to respond to something awkward.